Hey everyone, welcome to the Dill Pickle Movie Network. I am Dylan Randazzo. The summer movie season has come and gone so fast. We are approaching the awards season, we're approaching fall. So as you sit back with your pumpkin spice lattes, let's reflect on the summer of 2022 and all the amazing films we got. This was a very interesting year because a lot of the big tentpole blockbuster films, some of them are on this list, but a lot of them I wasn't the biggest fan of. I think some of the Marvel films were a little bit underwhelming. I think Lightyear was a tad underwhelming. Jurassic World Dominion was probably the worst thing I've seen from any blockbuster in the last few years. But while that's disappointing, it's also exciting because there's a lot of films that were not necessarily on my radar. Films I wouldn't have thought about on a top 10 list going into the summer that ended up being surprises. These may not be the 10 best films made this summer, but these are the 10 that I'm most excited about to recommend to you. Some you've probably heard of, some you've definitely heard of, some you probably haven't heard of at all. One film in particular that I don't think many people know even exists. Of course, there are films I didn't get to see the summer movie season. There are a few animated films I didn't see, the Bob's Burgers movie, DC League of Super Pets, The Sea Beast on Netflix, which I heard is very, very good. I can't wait to check those out. I also didn't see some of the newer works from some very popular directors like Alex Garland's Men, David Cronenberg's Crimes of the Future, George Miller's 3,000 Years of Longing. I actually didn't see that or Beast, the Idris Elba double feature that came out late in August. I do intend on getting around to all of those films that I mentioned, but of course, there's only so much time, and I wanted to prioritize the films that I was most excited about. Follow me on Letterboxd, Dylan_Randazzo, where I will be updating as I watch some of these movies later on in the year, and of course, as we approach award season, all the new films I'm going to see, I'm going to review on that Letterboxd account, so you can check those out there. Some honorable mentions before we get to our top 10. Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers. What a fun live-action animated hybrid. It didn't quite make my list only because while it evokes some of the best parts of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, it does feel a little bit copycat of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and I think that film that I mentioned does it a little bit better than Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers does, even though it's a blast. Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. I think this is a very interesting premise. I think the performances are excellent, especially Rachel Sennott, Lee Pace, Maria Bakalova, my favorite supporting performance of 2020 in Borat 2. Unfortunately, though, I think the characters themselves are just so unlikable that I found it hard to get through a few sections just because I hated the characters so much. I know that was the point, but having a group of characters who is almost unanimously across the board so toxic and hard to watch, I had to leave it off the list, even though I think it's a very interesting horror film and I did like it. One of the big surprises of the year was Minions: The Rise of Gru. This is not a fantastic film, but it is way better than I thought it would be. The Minions are the bane of my existence, but I think the key was always Gru. I think having Gru missing from the first Minions movie was detrimental. Here we get more Gru back. We get a little bit more of a balance between Minion and Gru. I don't want to go on anymore about this dumb little Minions movie, but I actually quite enjoyed it. And lastly, Elvis. If I had to pick a number 11, it would be Elvis. I love the sense of style of this movie. I do think Elvis, though, does feel a little tad too long. I think there are bits and pieces of it that just drag on far too long. And I do think while the film really does a great job emphasizing the glory and the glamour of Elvis, I think they shy away from some of the problematic parts, especially involving Elvis's love life. I wish they had dug a little bit deeper in that respect, and maybe it would have cracked my top 10. One other thing I wanted to mention before getting into my top 10 is that there are no Sundance films on this list. There are some Sundance films I still need to get around to seeing, like Breaking and Fire of Love, which I've heard such great things about. But there are other Sundance films that came out this summer, like Emily the Criminal, Cha-Cha Real Smooth, one of my favorite films at Sundance this past year, and Brian and Charles. Those films are not going to be on this list because I've already talked about those films on this channel. I want to shed light on 10 films I haven't ranked yet. If you want to see my Sundance ranking that includes some of those films that I just mentioned, you can check it out on the top right corner. Otherwise, these films are all films that I have not ranked before, and those Sundance films will not be on this list for now, even though some of those films, spoiler alert, would have ended up in this top 10. But starting off at number 10, this one's a doozy, Lal Singh Chadha, and this is the one I was referring to earlier that you guys probably haven't heard about, or maybe you have because it was a very popular news story for like one day and then it went away, but this is the Bollywood remake of Forrest Gump. Now, people who know me know that I love Forrest Gump. It was my favorite movie growing up. As I've gotten older, I've started to see some of the criticisms other people have. While I don't necessarily agree with all of those criticisms, I can at least acknowledge them, and I don't think it's as perfect of a movie as I thought it was as a child. So maybe remaking it is a clever idea, especially setting it amongst the landscape of Indian culture in the 90s. This is very much a different film in the fact that it covers very different historical events. The lead character is obviously not Forrest Gump. His name is Lalsing Chada. Instead of sitting on a bench talking to strangers, he's sitting on a train talking to strangers. Instead of eating a box of chocolates, he's eating a box of little Indian delicacies.
मेरी मम्मी कहती थी कि जिंदगी गोलगप्पे जैसी होती है, पेट पले ही पर जावे, मन नहीं पड़ता.
There are some small details that are changed every so often that are very fun to watch and fun to see as a fan of Forrest Gump, as someone who holds the original so near and dear to my heart. But unfortunately, I don't think it's enough of a departure to fully justify itself as a remake of the original. I think when the original is perfect for what it's going for, in my opinion, I think it's a really, really great movie. I just think it's hard for another movie to improve it so much and change it so much to totally stand on its own. And I think that's where Lalsing Chada fails. But at the same time, because it is remaking such a great film in and of itself, it is very watchable, it's very enjoyable. The lead protagonist is so sweet, he's so much fun to watch, so endearing, and I think those are the reasons why people will enjoy this film. I just love to see a story I love told in a different context, in a different lens, even though it does feel very familiar to the original. Just for the sheer novelty of that, why not check it out?
अब कुछ लोग विश्वास नहीं करते, पर जिंदगी में चमत्कार होते हैं जी. हाँ.
At number 9, I have Hustle. Hustle stars Adam Sandler as a basketball scout for the Philadelphia 76ers. He goes to Spain to recruit some players. He kind of comes across this outdoor, just kind of free-for-all basketball league, and he sees these players playing, and there's one very, very special player that he immediately feels drawn to, and he immediately wants for the team. And you start to see how Adam Sandler's character approaches having this fresh talent who doesn't necessarily know the business of basketball and having to integrate him into that business. It really shows the ins and outs of the basketball industry, similarly to how Moneyball did with baseball. I really like seeing all the ins and outs of the basketball world. As a basketball fan on the court, it was fun to see all the stuff going on off the court and all the cameos. There's so many great NBA players who make a cameo appearance in this film, including the lead basketball player himself. He is a basketball player in real life, so it's really fun to see him take on an acting role and do it very successfully. But it isn't just about Adam Sandler's character and the actual business of basketball, but we hear a lot about this Spanish man's history as well, his family, and what it means to be someone coming to America from humble beginnings in Spain, and what his past means to him, and what his past means for him going forward in his career.
I gotta work. My mom and my daughter, they mean everything to me.
Salary's $900,000.
He will call in sick.
It is a really, really great film. I do think it hits a lot of these sports cliches we see in a lot of sports films. But the thing is, sports movies are so successful because they play into those cliches, and a lot of them do them very well. The overall use of those tropes, I think that's what sets Hustle apart from a lot of other similar films of its kind. Adam Sandler is incredible. Hollywood, pay attention, because Adam Sandler, when he does dramas, is really good. Punch Drunk Love, Uncut Gems, Hustle. These are great films. I wish Adam Sandler did more dramatic work, because he is truly extraordinary when he gets to dive into that other lesser known side of himself.
Hey, you love this game? I love this game. I live this game.
At number 8, we have Bullet Train. I was not necessarily looking forward to this. It looked like just another pulpy, bloody action film. But a very good friend of mine saw this film twice, and he was like, you gotta see Bullet Train, you gotta see Bullet Train. He saw it a third time. He brought me to the theater the third time to see it, and I was blown away. I was very amazed at all the choreography of the action itself, but not just the action, because the action is great, and the action is a lot of the reason to go to Bullet Train, but the characters, the way they're written, the interactions they have, the different motives every single character has. They're all on this train. They all think they have their own goals and objectives, but it turns out that their goals and objectives are a lot more intertwined than we were led to believe at the very start.
What am I snatching and or grabbing?
A briefcase.
You said you wanted simple for your first job back.
Doesn't get simpler.
This feels very Guy Ritchie, just in the way the dialogue is, the snippiness of the dialogue. There's a lot of British humor from some of the British characters.
Evan, where's the briefcase?
Oh, it's that shit. It was just there.
I love the different mixes of culture on this train, when you have all these different walks of life kind of trapped in one single vehicle, one single place. It's what makes films like 12 Angry Men very special, and I'm not going to compare 12 Angry Men with Bullet Train for anything other than the fact that they're all in the same location at the same time, but it creates a really great atmosphere and environment to have these characters interact, to see this action where some characters want to escape, but they can't because they're on this train that is ever moving. And I think the atmosphere of the train itself really plays into some of the action really well. Just seeing those character interactions, the different performances behind these characters, I think Aaron Taylor-Johnson is incredible. Brian Tyree Henry as well. The two of them just really stole the show for me. But there are other great performances from Brad Pitt, from Joey King, from some other names that I'm not going to spoil because they are surprises, but you guys have to check out Bullet Train. It is just a lot of fun, and I think of all the films on this list, this is one of those that epitomizes the summer blockbuster best. Pulpy, fun action, in a great setting, vibrant colors, a fun cast, really memorable characters, great dialogue, great interactions, great surprises, twists, and turns. This is everything you want from this kind of movie.
You sure you want to talk this out?
Not particularly, no.
Okay.
At number 7, we have BJ Novak's written, directed, and starring debut, Vengeance. This is a film that I did a full review for, so I'm not going to go too in-depth, but this film has one of the best inciting incidents of any film I've seen this summer, and that is that BJ Novak gets a call in the middle of the night, hearing that an ex-one-night stand has died, and he has to go to this funeral and pretend that he was her boyfriend.
It's okay, it's not someone I was close to.
But you flew to Texas for it?
Yes. It was a girl I hooked up with a few times.
It feels like Dear Evan Hansen a little bit, you know, having to make up this lie to make the family feel better. But I think the way Vengeance approaches this in a very darkly comedic way makes it a little bit more palatable. I think you can see why the main character is not necessarily the best role model and why he shouldn't really get away with all the stuff he's pulling off in this film.
I've heard so much about you.
I've heard, yeah.
But the comedy's great, the performances are great. I think this is a really confident, strong debut. There's a lot of nuance, not just in the comedy, but using the atmosphere of Texas. The fact that BJ Novak's character is from New York, comes to Texas for this family he's never met before, for this girl he barely knew who passed away, having to interact with different walks of life that are different from his. I think that's where most of the beauty stems from, not in the hijinks and the fun of the inciting incident, but in the interactions he has with all those different characters and being able to see someone who once had pre-existing judgments and biases toward a certain place and a certain group of people, and seeing how that's kind of turned on its head when he ends up in that place and he kind of ends up being the worst example of what he thought all of them were. And I really think it's a very strong debut. I think it's worth checking out. It may not be the most laugh out loud, out of your seat humorous film this year, but hey, it is a very smart, dark comedy that I think you guys will like.
Where are you right now? I'm in an Uber.
At number 6, we have Prey. Prey is one of those films I was not looking forward to because, spoiler alert, I haven't seen many of the Predator movies, but I watched Predator for this video. I watched Prey right after I watched Predator. Prey does wonders for this franchise. This franchise was very much struggling, especially in the last few films. The reviews it got, the box office, it has not been good. And while this film is not necessarily a box office juggernaut because it was released on Hulu and not in theaters, I think this was a very smart way to kind of revitalize a franchise, get people excited in Predator again. Because this takes Predator, and instead of going bigger and flashier with it, it kind of strips it down to its most simple form, and that is the theme of survival. Sticking to a very matter-of-fact survival story was just a great way to take this franchise, because you don't need all the glitz and glamour when your core themes are that strong, when your themes are that resonant, and when you can do so much with so little. The film follows Naru, played by Amber Midthunder. This is one of my favorite women protagonists in film this year and the past few years. She has such a great gutsy survivalist instinct, but she's so underestimated by everyone, including the Predator himself, to where she can kind of slither by, and she's very stealthy, and the way she kind of approaches the Predator is so different than how all of her male counterparts approach this Predator creature, and it really creates an interesting comment on gender norms. By using this very bare survivalist tale to tell this story, you're able to focus on so many more themes and layers, and instead of going bigger with the effects and the action, it can instead focus on those themes and what it means to be a woman in a man's world and having to prove herself, and what it means to be this person who is trying to find her place in her group of people, but also having a predator who is a mean, fighting, killing machine, but is also essentially trying to find its way in its own world, and to see how that prey and predator come and clash. It's one of the most intriguing films of this year, and I think for being a franchise film, it feels so fresh and original, and it feels like the first of a franchise. Like, I think if people watch this before watching any other Predator movies, I think they'll understand the gist of the Predator movies and the pathos of what those films are trying to evoke without having to have seen Predator in any other action. I think the effects here for the Predator itself are actually better than the original. I think there are some effects, though, that are a little wonky, like some of the animal effects in this film, but the Predator himself looks really good, looks really scary, and the action itself, it's still really well choreographed. Dan Trachtenberg, who directed 10 Cloverfield Lane, returns for this film and really knows how to build suspense and tension in both those films and does a great job in doing so here.
Why do you want to hunt? Because you all think that I can't.
At number 5, we have The Black Phone, and here's the deal with The Black Phone. It is the hardest sell of any movie on this list. Listen to the premise. A kid is abducted, and in order to try to get out of the clutches of his abductor, he has to communicate with the ghosts of the dead victims that were kidnapped before him through a mysterious telephone on the prison wall. That's a crazy sell, but somehow Scott Derrickson pulls it off. The best thing about this film is that it's not a full-fledged horror film. Yes, there's horror imagery. Some of the ghosts, there are some really disturbing images with that ghost-like nature, but I think it really taps into more of the thriller side of things, and I think that is why The Black Phone excels so well. Despite being so supernatural, it feels realistic in the fact that it is at its core just about this kid trying to survive and trying to find a way out, and how that survivalist instinct kicks in when he's pushed to his limits. While I do say it is more thriller than horror, there are still some horrific aspects, including Ethan Hawke's performance. Ethan Hawke played a great villain in Moon Knight, but he's even more menacing and even more scary here in The Black Phone. I think there are some side plots that don't necessarily need to be there, but it doesn't really matter because the core plot is so strong in and of itself. It's got great performances through and through, especially from Ethan Hawke. It is very suspenseful, very thrilling, and just one of the most unique and original premises I've heard for a horror film that seems really crazy on paper, but is pulled off very well in execution. At number 4, a film that nobody has been talking about, but I think everyone should be talking about, that is Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris. People who know me, I mean, you see the calendar behind me. Paddington, it's my vibe. It's my favorite thing in the world. I love Paddington. I love just the nature of this kind-hearted, just warm-spirited bear. Mrs. Harris is this year's Paddington. Mrs. Harris is such a delightful protagonist, played by Leslie Manville. The premise of the film is that she's cleaning a house and sees this beautiful Dior dress, and she wants to go all the way to Paris to buy herself a dress.
I'm gonna buy a dress. A Christian Dior from Paris.
But instead of just hopping on a flight and going to Paris, because that's too easy, you see Mrs. Harris and how she goes about getting the money to go to Paris, and how she really sets a goal for herself and accomplishes that goal. But that's only half the movie. She does go to Paris, as the title suggests, and when she gets to Paris, she realizes that you can't just get a Dior dress and just walk out. You have to make appointments every day to get fitted, you have to have the dress tailored to your size. So Mrs. Harris then has to find a place to stay in Paris, and through that meets so many delightful people along the way. Some people who at first are quite mean-spirited, but some of them have nice arcs and they sometimes come around, but some of them who are very, very sweet, just like Mrs. Harris. You have so much film that is, dominated by IPs and blockbusters and big studios, and then you have films that are, kind of darker and edgier, maybe have something to say more cynically, and then you have a film like Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris, which is this cute, tiny little gem that just has all the warmth and kindness and positivity and optimism at its core. It's just so delightful. It's one of those films that, while it does not have the greatest, best effects of any film, while it is not the deepest story, it is still a story that I think is resonant, and maybe even more so important because it is universal, because it applies to everyone, because everyone can watch this film and learn something about themselves. Whether you are Mrs. Harris and you have to learn how to do things for yourself at times and not just for others, and how to use that kindness to help change those around you, but also never forgetting to always take care of yourself. Or if you're one of the people that Mrs. Harris doesn't necessarily get welcomed with open arms by, and you can kind of see yourself in that perspective and see maybe that you should be more accepting of strangers and people that are a little bit seemingly different than you, and maybe not judging a book by its cover. No matter which character you relate to in this film, you can relate to a character in this film, and I think that's what's so beautiful about Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris. It's a simple story, but one that you can latch on to depending on your own personal experience, and just what it has to say about goals and ambitions and striving towards something larger. Even if it's just a dress, it's a dress. You're gonna wear it maybe once, maybe not at all. And I love the resolution of this film too, and seeing what happens and what comes of her journey to Paris and what all evolves because of it and the people she changes. I mean, this is the Paddington of this year. It's all about good-natured people and kindness and helping others, and it's one of those films that I think every human being should see, not just because it's important, but because it's so delightful. It's just one of the most happy, joyous experiences you'll be able to see all year.
Who's that bloke?
That's the master himself, Monsieur Dior.
He looks like my milkman.
At number 3 is Jordan Peele's Nope. This is a film I could probably spend 2.5, 3 hours dissecting. In fact, later on, sometime in the near future, maybe the far future, depending on how long it takes to prep, I may do a full-length commentary for this film because there's so much going on. At its very surface level, it's about UFOs that drop things from the skies, people get killed, and these two siblings, played by Daniel Kaluuya and Keke Palmer, who are both exceptional in this, are trying to both avenge those deaths and try to capture one of the greatest sights they've ever seen and trying to capture it on camera. That's a very basic level synopsis of this film. At its core, as you dig deeper into the film, layer upon layer upon layer, there's so much more. There's themes about animal exploitation and what it means to abuse animals in art and what we do as consumers and the things we demand from studios, from creators in order to give us the most ideal product and what that means, and sometimes the people that are mistreated, or the animals in this case that are mistreated in doing so. And you kind of see the UFO itself being a symbol for that animalistic nature as well, and the fact that you can't necessarily tame wildlife because it is wildlife. And yes, there are domesticated animals, but there are also things that you have to let be, that you can't tempt, you can't taunt. And this film does a great job doing so in a flashback that is one of the scariest things I've ever seen, one of the most harrowing flashbacks I've ever seen, but it also deals with just the idea of spectacle in general, not just in relation to exploiting animals in film, but just the idea of spectacle and how far we go to see the greatest sights or to be the first to do something, and sometimes the detriments that come with that. More often the detriments that come with that. Steven Yeun's character especially, we see a connection between the flashbacks and that animal exploitation storyline and the idea of spectacle, and how his whole story comes full circle, and also with these two siblings, what they set out to do in trying to capture this UFO, but then it becomes something more than that. It becomes a survival film. They have to actually survive this beast. And I feel like I just said those were all the layers, but those are only a few layers. There's so many more layers within that surface. There's stuff about race as well, and not just animal exploitation, but black exploitation. I think this is one of those films that you can't just get on a first viewing. You have to see multiple times. I saw it twice, and I'm still thinking about it. I'm still trying to peel away every single layer, and I think that's the beauty of a film like this. He's using these Spielbergian giant spectacles himself, but also trying to make a commentary about spectacle and the dangers of spectacle all at once. And I think it's this perfect marriage of delivering a really great studio horror film that is scary, that'll have you on the edge of your seat, that has an exciting third act, but also bringing so much nuance to it where it's not just there for entertainment's sake. There's a lot more to learn beneath the surface, and that's always been Jordan Peele's MO, but especially in this context. Get Out and Us were also very heavy on commentary and great layered subtext, but I feel like those films were more about the subtext and less about the overall thrills and the overall spectacle of it all. Here, it has all those nuances that Get Out and Us did, but it has even more of the horror, even more of the just giant spellbinding visuals, and I think this is just a masterclass across the board in every single technical aspect. And the fact that this isn't number one is quite shocking. Just having talked about it, this may move up on the list tomorrow. This may move up on the list a week from now. It is one of the most fascinating films you'll ever see.
Let's go, baby! Let's go!
At number 2, I have Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. If anyone saw these little shorts way back when, maybe a decade ago, these Dean Fleischer Camp, Jenny Slate shorts of this little shell showing us his home life and the different things he collects around his home and how he lives as this little shell with googly eyes. It's a very cute series of shorts, but when they announced they were making a full-length film of this, I was like, really? Like, this is the movie you're gonna make it? Okay, I trust you. Good thing I trusted them, because it is one of the most perfect films I've ever seen.
He has got to go. Not that I don't like Arthur.
Not that. I'm okay.
No. Oh my God. No.
The premise of this Marcel the Shell adventure is Marcel the Shell is living in this Airbnb with his grandmother.
We like to watch 60 Minutes because Leslie Stahl is fearless.
And Dean Fleischer Camp actually plays a documentarian who is staying in the Airbnb and who's basically documenting Marcel in his everyday life. We find out what has happened to his family. His family is no longer there. And through his everyday life, you start to see the ambitions of trying to find his family, but also the care and love he has for his grandmother, and also the challenges that poses when he wants to be able to go search for his family. He has these large ambitions and large goals, but he has so much care for his grandmother that he sometimes sacrifices his own goals for his grandmother. And it's kind of a similar idea to Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris, like I just talked about, where it deals with someone who is so kind that they become almost a little too selfless, to where they stop thinking about themselves first. And I know this is about a shell, this is, you know, an inanimate object, essentially, but it still draws out something so profound to say about familial relationships, to allow yourself those adventures and not miss out on your own life just because of someone else's life, but also being able to show that person that means so much to you how much they mean to you. This film is so emotional for me. Like, I love this movie. As someone who is very close with both my grandmothers, I was very close with my great-grandmother before she passed. I'm very close with my mother, very close with my sister, these important women in my life. And to see that this is a movie rooted in Marcel and this amazing grandma figure, and just that relationship they build, I mean, that is one of the most beautiful relationships you'll see put to film, and it's done in this sweet little quirky shell mockumentary animated hybrid live action thing. It's just so unique, yet it tells themes that are so universal and have been preached for decades upon decades, because it is some of the most important philosophies of life itself. And I think this film is one of the best films to preach those philosophies.
Marcello, let's forget about being afraid. Just take the adventure.
And my number one film, it's Top Gun Maverick. I'm not even gonna try to draw out the suspense. Some of these films lower on the list are maybe more unique, maybe more clever, maybe have stronger thematic resonance at times, but I think Top Gun Maverick does something that a lot of other films just haven't been able to master, and that is just the epitome of a summer blockbuster, and what a summer blockbuster should be, and what we've lost sight of for so many years. I mean, seeing this film, I feel like we've been waiting almost 5 or more years for a film like this to come out. Not since maybe Mad Max Fury Road, and even then, while that film was fantastic, it didn't have the same cultural effect that Top Gun Maverick had. For a film like this to come out and universally just kind of unite everyone and have everyone excited to go back to the movies, seeing these things on the big screen, having someone behind the camera who is just an excellent craftsman in Joseph Kosinski, and having someone like Tom Cruise who wants to go bigger and better and bolder to get the perfect image that he wants. I mean, I know I just talked about the dangers of that in Nope, and Nope is a great antithesis to Top Gun Maverick in the fact that it talks about how, you know, spectacle can drive someone crazy at times. But in this sense, spectacle drove Tom Cruise a little bit crazy, but in a good way, because he delivers some of the most death-defying and crazy stunts I've ever seen. All these actors are in the planes themselves. He wanted to have the most authentic aerial scenes possible for these dogfights, and he literally had the cast go through extensive training to be able to withstand the G-forces. I just think the process of getting this film made makes it feel like actual artists, actual people who care so much about the craft. Every single one of them who worked on Top Gun Maverick clearly had passion for it, because it shows through every single frame. I just think the dedication is unlike any other film. This summer was full of amazing films, but I think the devotion and the dedication to entertain is what makes Top Gun Maverick so special. The actual contents of the film itself are so special. I mean, this deals with legacy in such a profound way, and what it means to grow older and trying to adhere to those lessons that you learned when you were younger. In this case, the idea that Maverick wasn't one of a kind, and he had to conform to the Top Gun military styles, otherwise he was going to endanger those around him.
My dad believed in you. I'm not gonna make the same mistake.
But I think this film preaches a much better message in the fact that, yes, showing that being a complete rogue, completely distancing from your pack is not the way to go, but also being just one who follows all the rules may also not be the way to go. And maybe you have to kind of find a balance of both, where you are willing to still be your own individual and expressive and bold self, but also still be able to work with a team, but then be able to say when you think something is not right within the system and being able to kind of take down the system. We see that, especially with John Hamm's character, trying to keep everything orderly, and to see Tom Cruise's character Maverick and to see the lengths he goes to try to say that that may not be the best plan. We have to break the rules, we have to be bold, but breaking the rules with a little bit more security and a little bit more forward thinking than the old Maverick would do. And I think that's a great evolution for the character.
Jeez! Having any fun yet?
It's a film that I didn't think we needed, but I think after seeing it, I think we definitely needed it. Not just as a continuation of this story for Maverick's character to get over his own grief and his own traumas, but also for an audience, for a group of people, for a nation, for a world that has gone through some of the toughest years ever in the history of the world the past few years. The pandemic was one of the toughest things. It is the toughest thing I've ever lived through. And to be able to all kind of come together as we're hoping for the end of this, as we're coming over the hill. And yes, it's not done yet, but you know, I think Top Gun Maverick is almost a great symbolism for just what we've had to endure the past few years. Yes, it was filmed pre-COVID, but I think having released it post-COVID makes it even more poignant and more reflective in the fact that, you know, it quite literally deals with these planes that are flying so close to the surface that they could crash any minute, but seeing those planes come over the other end and come over the hill, and what that means and what that symbolizes, and the camaraderie and just kind of the unification that that brings. Not conformity, but unification and togetherness and teamwork. And I love this film. And just the way it's shot, the way it's stylized is brilliant. Like I said, the actors are going up in the planes. They're experiencing these high altitudes themselves. It's a very authentic feel. And just the actual craft, the actual way the shots are filmed, it is so mesmerizing. It is one of those feats that I think very few film crews are going to be able to pull off anytime soon. And yes, I did compare this to Mad Max Fury Road in the fact that it is such an original, amazing, bold take on a beloved property, or a property in Mad Max's case that was almost kind of forgotten about. But this is an even more universal film in the fact that it has gotten so much box office money. I mean, the fact that this is making so much money over a Pixar film about Buzz Lightyear, over a Jurassic Park sequel where they bring the original characters back, over 2 Marvel films. The fact that Top Gun Maverick is able to soar above them in such a elevated height, I think that just shows just how meaningful this film was for so many people, and how vital it was that we got Top Gun Maverick this summer to make us all happy to go back to the theaters in a safe manner, but also in a manner that got us excited for what was to come for the future of cinema. That film really reignited my faith in the cinema summer blockbuster. And this whole list really just showed that so many great films come out every summer. Some of them maybe you've never heard of, like Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris or Lal Singh Chadha. Some you maybe have heard about too much, like Nope or Top Gun Maverick. But either way, I think all these films are so special in their own unique ways. And that's what makes this summer of 2022 so special and so hard to say goodbye to. But moving forward, we are heading into award season, as I mentioned, and I cannot wait to talk about even more films as they come. Everyone, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please like, comment, subscribe. It really helps the channel grow, and share with your friends. If you have friends that love Top Gun Maverick, say, hey, this guy is, you know, geeking out over Top Gun Maverick. Or if you're one of the very few who saw Lal Singh Chadha, say, hey guys, this guy saw the Forrest Gump remake. Check it out, because that's fun too. Have a great one, y'all. I'll see you next time. Bye.